Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to this session. I know it's late in the day. I really appreciate you all joining us today. So our topic here is how do you secure access to your O365 and other application with Enterprise Mobility Suite. I'm Dilip Radhakrishnan. I'm a lead program manager with the Microsoft Intune team. My team works on security, access control, and data protection features in the Intune service. I also have two of my colleagues here who will be joining us later during the talk. One is Sam, or better known as Mr. ADFS, and we have Chris Green from the Intune team as well. Before I actually get into the agenda, can I just have a quick show of hands on how many people are actively either deploying O365 services or evaluating Office 365? Great. Awesome. That's good to see that. And that is pretty much the case these days when we work with most of our enterprise customers. We're seeing a huge momentum in that. So what we'll start off with is a brief assessment of where things are today with access control technologies and what are some of the challenges that are being faced by customers like you who are moving from on-prem to cloud scenarios. And then we'll do a deep dive into how we can help secure O365 services like email service and SharePoint service with the Microsoft Intune service, Azure AD, and rights management. And then Sam will come on and talk about how we can extend that same kind of concepts and features capabilities in EMS to secure your access to third-party SaaS applications as well. But we also know that a big chunk of our customer base is still with on-prem Exchange Server, on-prem SharePoint, or they still have line of business apps that are all on-prem. So we will also do a deep dive into how do we help those hybrid organizations who are either in the process of moving to the cloud or who have some specific workload scenarios where they have to keep the data on-premise. How do you help secure that? And then finally, we'll give a sneak peek at some of the exciting new features that are coming later this year. Let's start with the scenario today, right? So primarily, if you look at every enterprise, they have a set of critical on-prem infrastructure with Exchange or SharePoint or your line of business apps. So that's the kind of core infrastructure that you see on my right. And that is all secured using Active Directory as the primary identification mechanism. So on the right, we had PCs coming and trying to access that corporate data that's sitting on-prem. And that used to be the predominant way people were accessing till at least 3 years back. But with the explosion of mobile devices and people are getting access to OVA and SharePoint from browsers, so pretty much the choke point was in the DMZ, what we call the perimeter, where there was a different set of choices of solutions that customers have deployed. Some of them deploy like an appliance, like a VPN server or like a Cisco or a Juniper kind of appliance right in the DMZ and use that to filter and route all the traffic through that, where they can do the access control checks. Some of them implement a reverse proxy, like our own web application proxy or the Azure web app proxy. We also have customers who do just a secure email gateway that just filters Exchange Active Sync traffic and does do some access control there. And then we obviously have a lot of our customers who rely on Active Directory Federation services and how you can use that to do access control to your on-prem resources. But the reality is, as you saw when all the hands went up in the room, Office 365 and other services from Microsoft are really driving the adoption to the cloud. And it's not just our own ecosystem. It's like there's a huge set of third-party SaaS applications as well that is helping drive that momentum. And whether in some cases it is IT departments that are driving the change and adopting and embracing this, in other cases they are forced to and dragged along because their users are already storing their data in Dropbox or some other service. So your corporate data is already leaking out of your enterprise. So in that kind of environment, the key challenge is how does a perimeter kind of solution that's implemented really deal with these new cloud scenarios? And the answer is it really doesn't. It doesn't do a good job even if they try to. Because your devices are directly connecting to cloud services, and there is no point in forcing everybody to route back to your corporate network through VPN or something and then get them access to the cloud data. It defeats the purpose of having a cloud service. So the solution is you need to have applications and services natively built with access control technologies built into these apps and the services. If you look at like Office 365 service, you have the email service, you have a SharePoint service, and you have a variety of client applications that access that, which is your Outlook app, your OneDrive app. So you need an end-to-end solution where both your service endpoint as well as the applications know how to do a handshake and a kind of protocol where they can really make sure access control is done the right way. Okay, so let's take a step back and look at what are the different layers of protection and how you get that with the Enterprise Mobility Suite. At the base level, any device that you bring in, there's a basic set of MDM functionality. This is a kind of feature set that I would call today, it's getting quickly commoditized, because there are only a certain set of knobs in every operating system, like iOS or Android or Windows, that every MDM vendor has the ability to tweak, whether it's setting your password or your VPN and Wi-Fi and certificates. That's like fundamental basic capability that every MDM solution does, and Intune through EMS does that as well. But the real value add comes when you actually layer on top of that all the Office applications, your Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, all these applications come built in with two sets of libraries. The first set of library, it's called the Active Directory Authentication Library that helps us implement all these access control scenarios that we're going to be talking about. And then the second set of capabilities they come with is they also integrate with what we call the Intune Data Protection SDK. So what that gives you is the ability to do all these kind of cool copy-paste block or make sure data doesn't leak out of the corporate applications into a personal space. This is some of the demos you saw at the keynote, and you're going to see more of that today. And more importantly, when you're working on a collaboration scenario, you're trying to share documents with your vendors, your partners, and they're trying to get access to the data. In those cases, we also make sure that the files are encrypted and the encryption travels with the files, so that when you want to remotely control and access that data, who gets to view it and who gets to, if you want to actually remotely kill the access to the document, you can all do that through Rights Management Service. And once you have this first-party apps from Microsoft adopting these kind of access control and data protection capabilities, we also make that available for our ecosystem. And we partner very closely with some of the large vendors out there. So you'll expect to see some announcements coming in the next few months on how some of these larger vendors beyond Office have also adopted these kind of Active Directory libraries as well as the data protection SDKs. So, and the benefit, as I said, is you get that kind of capability natively without doing any proxy or any infrastructure on-prem to manage your cloud services. And if you still are in the hybrid mode or you have on-prem resources, we'll be able to address that scenario as well. So what is the main feature that actually enables this? The fundamental feature, it's called the conditional access. And that's a feature of Azure Active Directory Premium. So if you look at the different ways you can do access control, it starts with user attributes. This is the bread and butter scenario for kind of basic access control that's been there forever. So you have to say who you are as a user, which security groups you belong to, so that you can make sure that you have access only to those resources that you're entitled to. But what we've really added is a layer of several additional kind of checks that can help you address different kinds of security threats. For example, if you think most of the hacks today happen because of a compromised username or password. So if you do suspect that that's happening, then you can make sure that you can start enforcing MFA. Or even if you don't, you can, for certain critical line of business applications, you could always enforce multi-factor auth. So that could be a way to say that every user needs a second factor, like a phone or a text message or something, to prove that he is who he claims to be. And once you've gone past the user authentication, the real value add that comes through EMS is the ability to do device authentication. So not only you're first proving who you are as a user, then your next step is to say who and what devices am I accessing it from? Is it known to IT department? Is it compliant to all my IT policies? So those are the next set of attributes that you set based on a device identity. And then if the user loses a device or something, we can actually set those attributes in Azure AD to make sure access and sync from that device is completely turned off. Moving on, as I said, there are different types of applications, and you could choose to have different kinds of rules of how you do access control for those applications, depending on how critical the business data is. For example, for all your corporate-owned employees, you could choose to say that they need to be managed and compliant. They need to be enrolled in MDM. They have to be compliant before they get access to some data, like SharePoint. Whereas if you're collaborating with a vendor, a third-party vendor who's wanting to access some of your data, they could already be managed by some other MDM system that by the company that they work for. So they're not going to force them to enroll into MDM, but you could require them to require a multi-factor auth before they get access to their data. And some of the other capabilities that we are working on is the ability to do conditional access based on network location. It's a very popular ask, like whether are you inside your corporate network or are you outside your corporate network? And based on that, I want to enforce different kinds of policies. The last thing is a topic that we have recently been working on. It will come in later in the year, but it's a concept of risk profiles, where at the time of doing your access, the system is smart enough to do some kind of a risk assessment and to say, okay, who's the user who's accessing it? Has there been any past intrusions based on that user? Has it been compromised in the past? And then what devices are they accessing from? And those kinds of data feed into the information, and what kind of applications are they accessing. It can help come up with a kind of a security score or a risk score that can be used as a basis for doing the access control. And with that, let's dive deep into how we do this for some of the Office 365 services. So we're going to show a set of demos where it's going to start with each one of these 4 phases we're going to show. So we're going to start with how do you do conditional access, which is like how do you block a user from initially getting access to their email or SharePoint until they are managed and compliant by the IT department. So we're going to start with that. And then the other key part of that is it's not just important that you turn on security controls. Your security team will be happy, but your end users are definitely not going to be. I mean, they just want to get to their data, and they are real valid users. They're good citizens, but they still, in most cases, might be forced through a bad experience. So what we did was between Azure AD, Intune, and Office, invested a lot of time and resources on making sure that the end user experience for this workflow is seamless, and it's very easy for somebody to get onboarded quickly and get compliant and get access to their data. And then the other key scenario there is what happens if it's not a one-time thing, right? So the user is compliant, they get access to the data, and then they decide to give their phone to their kid or something, the device gets jailbroken, and then those kinds of scenario where the device drifts from a desired compliant state, we need to be able to detect that and then automatically revoke access when that happens. And then once you've now secured your access to your data, the next step is now the data will be allowed to be synced to the device. So you get the data down to the device, which is where the Intune's data leak prevention capabilities come in. You saw some in the keynote demo where tried to copy paste out of your container, and we put all those controls in place. And we have a deep dive session tomorrow just focusing on those detailed MAM capabilities as well. And then I talked about this briefly, so we'll be showing a demo of how then the data through RMS gets protected. And then last but not least, what happens when a device is lost or stolen, how do you get a selective wipe capability? So with that, I'll hand it off to Chris for a series of demos.
1, 2. Can you hear me? Okay, that's good. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Green. I'm a program manager working with Dilip on the Microsoft Intune team, and I have a few demos to show you here today. So as Dilip was alluding to, we have a number of different layers of data protection offered through the EMS suite of services. So the first thing that I just wanted to show you is, from an admin's perspective, how do I actually set up and configure the access control, which is what we call conditional access, as well as the app-level policies that we set, also known as MAM, or app management. So the first thing I want to show you is conditional access. So for conditional access, we basically break down into 2 key steps in terms of implementing this as policy within your organization. The first is to do something that we refer to as a compliance policy, which defines what it means for a device to be compliant in order to access resources such as Exchange Online or SharePoint Online. So the first thing that I would do is go into our policy section within the Intune web console and then define a compliance policy. So for this demo, I've already gone ahead and created one. So if I open that up, it'll just show us what are some of the types of rules that we can configure for this compliance policy. So if we look down the list here, we can see things like, hey, I can set some password restrictions. So for this demo, I've required that my devices have a password set, and then the minimum length for that password is set to 5. So only devices with a passcode set to 5 or greater will have access to email. I also have some other advanced settings if I want to add a more complex policy. So if we scroll down a little bit more, there are other settings available. For example, I can set a requirement that my device be encrypted, or that only non-jailbroken or non-rooted devices are allowed access. Finally, I can also configure a rule to say that devices must have an email profile configured and managed through Intune. So that's the first key step. I would then save this policy out and deploy it to a group of devices. Second, I want to configure a conditional access policy, which you can see here, up here, is a list of subnodes under the conditional access node. Think of these as singletons, so you would ever only configure a single conditional access policy for Exchange Online and a single one for SharePoint Online. So if we look at Exchange Online, we'll just open that up, and again, for this demo, I've already set up the policy. The basic thing you want to do here is set, hey, yes, I want to block email access and restrict that only to devices that are compliant. And then beneath that, I can specify what are the security groups who are subjected to this policy. So any users within these Azure Active Directory groups must enroll their device with Intune and must be compliant with the compliance policy that I just defined. I can also specify any exempted groups. So for example, if I have some VIPs who I want to make sure they never lose access, they're getting some special treatment, I can put those users in that group. So that's conditional access in terms of how to configure it within Intune. Just remember those two key steps of set a compliance policy for the device and then set a conditional access policy for the service principal being accessed. So next I'm going to switch over to how to set up a MAM policy or an app restriction policy for apps that are under management. So for example, if I've decided to manage Office applications on mobile devices, I can set up a app restriction policy to set controls around that application. So to do that, I go to the configuration policy section. And again, for the demo, I've already set up my policy. If I drill into that, I can see some of the other settings that are available here. So for example, I've set a rule to say that data can only be opened up in other managed applications, as well as I've prevented the ability to save documents or data outside of those managed apps to either the local device or to some cloud location like Box. I've also set the policy around preventing copy and paste, which I'm sure you've seen in the keynote in a few other demos. So that's where that policy would be set. So again, I can just save this out and deploy it to a targeted group and then have that policy applied when that group of users enroll with Intune. So that just shows what, from the admin's perspective, what is entailed for rolling out those levels of data protection. Now I'd like to show you from the end user standpoint what all of this will look like. So first I'm going to start with iOS. So I'm an end user. My name's Rex. I work for Chris G Technologies, and I just got this brand new iPad for my birthday. And of course, the first thing I want to do is start working on it because I'm like super keen. So I'm going to first set up my email because that's really the primary scenario for a lot of end users is to get email down to their mobile devices. So in order to do that, I'm going to set up a new Exchange profile. Just bear with me while I enter my credentials. Okay, so now that I've signed in and set up this mail account, I'm going to go over to my mail app. And I've already got my personal account, but I'm going to start looking to sync my corporate mail. Just wait till it syncs here. So the first thing I see is this message that's been pushed into my inbox from Exchange. And it's telling me that I actually need to go and enroll with Intune before I can start accessing the rest of my mail. And this is really the only email I'm going to get until I do all of that stuff. So what else do I want to do? I also want to set up OneDrive. I've got a OneDrive app already installed. I've got my personal files already syncing, including my cute cat. I want to start adding my OneDrive for Business account so I can get my work files. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And once I sign in, the OneDrive app is actually authenticating against Azure Active Directory. And when it does so, AAD is saying, well, I don't know about this device. It doesn't exist within the directory. I'm going to prompt the end user to go ahead and enroll with Intune, which also registers itself with Azure AD until I allow access. So the prompt I get is I need to go ahead and enroll. So once I tap enroll, that then redirects me over to an Intune hosted site that prompts me to install something we call the company portal app, which is an app that runs locally and provides access to Intune-based services like app deployment. But it also drives the enrollment process. For the sake of the demo, I've already installed the app, so I'm just going to open it up. Probably by now you've memorized my password. So when I sign in, the company portal app also knows that I'm not yet enrolled and will go ahead and prompt me to do so as soon as the screen launches. And once that process starts, it will then trigger a download of what we call a management profile, which starts applying policy and registers the device with the Intune service. This can take just a couple seconds. I think all of you have to get off Wi-Fi, so if I can get enough bandwidth to enroll here. Let me just maybe kill it and start again. Okay, there we go. So now it's going to prompt me to enroll. Okay, so I think while it's doing that, I'm just going to switch over. Oh, there we go. We're moving along. So again, this management profile comes down from the Intune service and registers the device with Intune. One of the other things that it does will register the device with Azure Active Directory, which Dilip referred to when he said that you can now authenticate devices as well as users. So here, a certificate is being enrolled on the device, which is used then to authenticate against services like SharePoint Online and Exchange Online when trying to access from a mobile device. It also creates that device object record in Azure AD. more network failures. Okay, I think we're going to move on, but from here the end user just proceeds with the enrollment process and then is able to access their files. So now another scenario that I just wanted to show you, we'll switch over to my Android device. And in the scenario here, I'm a user who's already enrolled. I've got my Android phone enrolled with the Intune service, but my admin has changed a policy to require that now I need a passcode length of 5 instead of 4. So I've actually gone out of compliance in this case. And what does it look like in order to get back into compliance? So for this demo, I'm also showing the Outlook app, which now adds support for Intune management, which we announced here at Ignite and is coming later in Q2. For the purpose of the demo, rather than waiting for my token to expire, I've actually gone ahead and removed my work account and will re-add it just to kind of speed up the process. So I'm just going to launch my Outlook app, and here I already have my personal emails that are being sent, and I'm going to add my work account. So at this point, I'm getting a different prompt. My device object exists in Azure AD. AD knows about the device, but Intune, in its last policy evaluation, decided that this device is no longer in compliance and updated the device object record to say that fact. The next time I tried to authenticate, Azure AD knew that I was out of compliance and blocked me from accessing my email. So this time, when I tap on Details, I'm then brought to an Intune page that provides information about why I'm out of compliance. So when I log in, I can view my device, and it will give me some detailed compliance information. So for example, here, because it's out of compliance, I can go ahead and update my PIN. Also, in the notification section, there are notifications about compliance issues on my device. So for example, when I tap on Secure Your Device, I'm actually brought over to the section in Settings where I can update it. So once I enter my current PIN, I can go ahead and update one that is a new length. For security purposes, the screen doesn't update when I'm actually entering my PIN on Android, but I'm just entering one that's a bit longer. So now that I've updated it, I can go back to the web portal and do another compliance check. So at this point, the web portal is triggering my device to check in with the service again and evaluate it against that same policy to determine whether I have access. So now it's telling me I'm in compliance, so I can go back to my mail, add my account again, and this time I'm allowed in. So now I can see my work email alongside my personal email. Oh, thanks for that email at the top there. This one from Terrence wasn't in the demo originally, but I appreciate it. Okay, so now this covered the conditional access scenarios, including the scenario where my device is brought back into compliance and I'm allowed resumed access to my corporate email. So now I want to switch over to some of the app restriction policies that I've set for the Outlook app to prevent leakage of data outside the app once I have email access. So for example, I can open up this email from Alice, and just as a simple example, I can go ahead, try and copy some of this content, switch over to Twitter, and then when I hold down my thumb, nothing happens. So I can't paste. And I think you've seen this demo a few times already. But what are some of the other restrictions? So for example, if I go back to Outlook, I try opening this file. Immediately it opens up in Office, which happens to be another Office managed app through Intune. I was not presented with an option to open up the spreadsheet in Sheets, which is Google's kind of attempt at Excel. So now I can only open this file in Office Mobile. And then if I try to go there and I see, well, first, Save As is disabled, so I can't save it locally, I can't save it to Box. And also if I try to share it and send it as an attachment, the only options I have for sending it are through other managed apps like Outlook and OneDrive. There's no Gmail in that list. Okay, so that covers some of the other capabilities from the end user standpoint around app restriction policies. So for one last scenario, what happens when me, Rex, decides to leave the company? Well, you know, in an old world, I might bring all my corporate email with me. But now with Intune, my admin can go ahead and retire my device. So I'm just going to go and find that user's devices. So I'm going to go ahead and issue a retire, which is basically going to remove the management footprint from the device, like all the apps that are under management, like Mail that I've got set up on my device. So I'll go ahead and trigger that.
Do you want to switch?
So now if I switch back to my accounts, oh, see, all my work email is just gone. So right away, that data is being yanked from the device, and I'm back to where I started before I joined the organization. Okay, so that covers app restriction policies. The last thing I just really quickly wanted to show you was around protection of content, which is really offered through our rights management service in EMS. This is a new dashboard that's been announced here at Ignite that provides capabilities around auditing and revoking access to documents that are protected through RMS. So for example, if I open up one of the documents in the list, I can quickly see a dashboard of some of the statistics, such as the number of times the document has been accessed, whether any denials have happened, and the activity around that. I can even see on a map where these attempts are coming from. So that just gives a very kind of quick overview of what that dashboard can provide you. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Dilip.
Thank you, Chris. So you saw how powerful it is to be able to control access from irrespective of where they are, make sure that they're compliant before they get access. So one of the things that we did, and you saw in the demo, was the Outlook application. It was a very popular application on iOS and Android called Acompli that we at Microsoft purchased the company in December, quickly turned it around, branded it as Outlook for iOS and Android. But then we've been working very closely with our team over the last few months to make sure that that application is really enterprise ready. And let's go and dig deep into what you just saw under what Chris demoed, right? So we have the Outlook application, and then these are the different players in that space, right? So the Outlook app needs to ultimately access the O365 service to get their email. And what the Outlook app also has, this particular architecture, is the Outlook Cloud Service. Think of it as an aggregation service because this lets you connect not just to Office 365, it connects to your Gmail. In fact, it's one of the most popular Gmail apps out there. So what this does is the Outlook app cloud service can help aggregate data from all these different emails, both the personal as well as corporate emails for the user. And then the other services in the picture are Azure Active Directory and Intune. So because the Outlook app is now integrated with the Active Directory authentication library, when Chris logged in for the first time, it checked and said, oh, Chris is a valid user, but the device that he was accessing was not valid. So it redirected him to a portal, which was the Intune portal with a page that redirects you to where to get the application, the Intune application. So what we implemented in that application was a unified enrollment workflow. The end user didn't have to go and do 2 steps. He didn't have to go and say, I want to enroll in Intune MDM, I want to go enroll into Azure Active Directory. All that happened seamlessly. They just had one enroll button. And then behind the scenes, it went and created a record for the device in the Intune service, but also behind the scenes created a device record for this object in Azure Active Directory. This is the key part because what happens is there's no concept of a device identity in a mobile device, right? So you can try to use IMEI number or some combination of that for different heuristics, but they don't really work well. So what we have done is there's a new service within Azure AD called the Device Registration Service that lets you workplace join a device, which is the equivalent of your domain join, but for your BYOD type devices. And once you bring those devices and you have a device record that's established in Azure AD, Intune is able to evaluate and enforce all the policies, the password compliance policy that you saw. And then it sets on that Azure AD object that was just created that the device is now managed and it's compliant. And when it went out of compliance, we went and flipped the bit on this particular attribute in Azure AD. And that meant that when the Outlook app was trying to access, now it got both an authentication token as well as a refresh token that it can use to access its services. So the first thing it does is it takes that token to access its own cloud service, the Outlook cloud service. And then that looks up Azure AD to make sure that this is valid token. And then once it does that, it requires a second level of security token that says, now, OK, I want to get email on behalf of this user. So then it goes and talks to the O365 service and then brings the email down to the user. As you can see, there's earlier reports of that this is not being secure and other things, but we've really addressed all those kinds of feedback to make sure it's a very secure token-based system. No username, password, nothing gets stored in the cloud. So the other demo that Chris showed was the OneDrive scenario. It's very similar, so I'm not going to walk through all the steps, but because the OneDrive app is also integrated with the Active Directory authentication library, it also got redirected to Azure AD, got the enrollment workflow going. But then in this particular case, once it got the token, it could directly access the SharePoint online service and then get the documents synced down to the device. So that is the high-level architecture of how we do this kind of access control, both with the Outlook app as well as the OneDrive app. And this is just the beginning of a series of these kind of services. You can think of Skype for Business, Yammer. Every Microsoft O365 service you can think of will have the same kind of capabilities where you get access control as well as rich data protection within those applications. So with that, I'll hand it off to Sam, where he can talk about how it moves to SaaS apps.
Hello, my name is Sam. I'm a little bit of an IND geek. I've been within the Active Directory team since I joined Microsoft about nearly 17 years ago in '98. So I've been hanging out for Windows 2000 days, even like a late night when we first moved all our NT4 BDCs and PDCs over to Active Directory. So now our world is kind of evolved quite a bit. Now, one of the key things that I think Dilip mentioned a few times, but I really wanted to kind of hone in on that point, is that in our world of EMS and Active Directory that spans across on-premises and the cloud, we think about users and devices as being a common fabric, all right? A common plane in which you can drive access both, whether it be to Microsoft Cloud Services, other cloud services, or even on-premises application. I think Dilip just talked about, and Dilip and Chris demoed, really thinking about how it kind of evolves from the Microsoft services. But you also notice that at the core, the platform essentially enables the notion of having users and device as that common fabric. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was that, hey, the same conditional access policy, the paradigm that you just saw about restricting access, whether it be based on different types of factors like multi-factor authentication, compliant devices, those same things extend to thousands of SaaS applications that are out there as well. So that's something that we at Microsoft support, where, hey, whether you're logging into a Salesforce app or you're logging into a Concur or your Paychex, it's a wide range and thousands of apps, and we have applications being added on an ongoing basis. Now, another key aspect is about the SaaS applications is that you can target specific groups of users or exclude specific groups of users. I think you saw some of this being expressed in the Intune portal, which does that for Office. But the core of that platform is Azure AD that gives you those policy capabilities where you can kind of dictate what that policy. So let's take a look at what it looks like. Now, this is, I'll show you a demo pretty soon, but imagine this to be the applications, a set of applications within my tenant. So I have a series of applications that I have. These could be SaaS applications. These could be line of business applications that you might also build. Now, assuming that you click one of these applications, it's as simple as you have a set of policies available. And now this is an early mock-up. I'll show in the demo it's kind of changed, some tweaks based on usability feedback. But as you can see out here is that you have the notion of targeting of groups, where you can say, I want to apply a policy for a certain group of users, and we also have exclusion groups, either for, like, the notion was that you always have exception processes in every organization. For example, help desk, you say, I need access, but I can't do this right now. You give them an hour's access by adding them to a group. That's an equivalent model. And you can go enable that. So I'm going to quickly move on to my demo. So the first thing is I'm within my own tenant, and I've gone to the applications. Today's demo, I'm going to show you Twitter access. A lot of us, including me, we have Twitter handles that are more work-related handles, and you tweet based on for your company or your organization. Now, one of the key things that we've seen quite a bit is that people hacking into business Twitter accounts, and as a result, you get weird tweets going on for that business. So now, let me go show. I've already set up Twitter as an application. I want to walk you through a couple of aspects to it. Now, you can see that first is I have a set of groups within my organization. And if you notice, I actually have a Twitter users group, and that's assigned to this Twitter application. So one of the things that what you can do is essentially you can use a group to say who is going to tweet, all right, on behalf of the company. So as a result, only they have an access to it. Now, the way I've set this up, and Twitter is, you can do multiple. You can have multiple Twitter accounts, so I can just add the application again and point it to a different Twitter account for doing that. I can use the same Twitter application and say, let every user say which set of accounts, which account that they want to tweet against. But in this case, I've already set it up where all of the users in this Twitter users group essentially get access to a single Twitter account, which happens to be my account in this case. Now, if I move on to the configure section, and you can see that A is that we have not enabled all the sets of policies that we have and support in the platform, and that's upcoming on a regular basis. But right now, we've got 3 capabilities out there. The first is really thinking about, hey, I always want to do MFA when you access this application. So as a result, you do that. And then the second one is really about where a lot of people, when you think about line of business applications, I don't mind allowing you seamless access from inside the network. But once you're outside, because I have lots of controls in terms of how you get inside my network. But once you come outside, I really want you to do multi-factor authentication. Or there's a category, we have lots of organizations that say you're not allowed to do work from outside, all right? And so as a result, I needed to block access because we find interesting cases where companies are liable, for example, if people work from outside. So as a result, they want to block access from outside. So I'm going to, before I change anything, I'm going to actually go to my client account. And I'm going to log in. So one of the things that what Azure AD has is that as part of getting these applications, there is an end user access panel. And in this case, I'm actually using an account from a machine that is compliant. So as a result, I should be seamlessly logged in because I'd logged in before, because this is a compliant device. And you can see on the access panel a tile for the Twitter account. Now let's see what happens out there. I am now seamlessly taken into Twitter, and Azure Active Directory supports two modes of connecting up to SaaS applications. One mode in which we call it password SSO, in which we're able to use a plugin or an extension to the different browsers in which you can essentially post and be able to get access into the Twitter, into that SaaS application. Now, another mode is actually where some of the larger cloud services have adopted a federated model. And within that federated model, you essentially have the ability where you can seamlessly sign in, where Azure AD can sign you into that application. But we do make sure that we are enforcing all that access. Now let's close this, all right, and now go back to the policy out here. So all I have to do is enable access. I'm saying it's for all users. It really doesn't matter. I'm not targeting any specific user. And let me save the policy. All right, looks like it's saved. Now let's go back and see the same application, Twitter application, being accessed. I'm going to get my phone out because I have to log in with that. And I go back to my access panel. So it's John. OK, it looks just the same. Now let's see what happens when I'm actually trying to access Twitter. You can notice, now you notice that even though I'm logged in, I just set a rule that says I've got to sign in with multi-factor authentication. So as a result, what's happened now is that, hey, the cloud, we recognize that you haven't done multi-factor authentication, and so we are now immediately, we are asking wherever you log in to do multi-factor authentication. In this case, John is part of my federated tenant. I'm coming back to ADFS to log John in. So I'm going to hit continue, and it's hooked up to my phone. Hopefully, I do have signal. OK, I'm just getting the phone call to log me in. And I am done. And that pretty much lets me log in. So now you can see the power of conditional access where you can do it based on when you need to protect a sensitive application. So in this case, I'm using Twitter as an example. But imagine a financial set of applications or your pay stubs that you might use from a cloud-based service. All those are feasible now where you can say rules like, I need to use multi-factor authentication, or I have to be on a compliant device to be able to go access these applications. OK, so now let's go back to our tech. So it's all goodness. We have now been talking about cloud applications. We talked about Office 365. We talked about other SaaS applications, and I used Twitter as an example. It could have been Salesforce. But what about the applications that you have today within your enterprise, or the resources that we have within your enterprise? How do you want to think about it? With EMS, we have the capability in which we can extend that to on-premises as well. Now let's kind of talk about what are the types of applications that we're talking about. Now the first could be standard. You have Windows integrated web applications that you use. The whole goal is that for us, what we see is that companies want to enhance productivity by allowing you to work from anywhere, right? Which means you can be at your Starbucks coffee shop or any coffee shop or at the airport, and you can access your work resources and continue to work. But And so, as a result, people are always trying to figure out how do I get access, but the other aspect is how do I secure that access as well. So now you have one class of applications where you have hundreds and thousands of apps within your organization that just are plain simple Windows IIS-based applications that use Windows Integrated. We see quite a few of them available. Or it could be applications that are more modernized or claims aware or federation aware. As a result, like I've kind of used ADFS as a mechanism to talk about it. And that's another example of applications. Or even more, you also have the notion where you have the ability to do per-app SSL VPNs into your organization where you have restricted access with full protocol fidelity. It's not HTTP protocols, which the top two are about. You have full protocol fidelity where you have full VPN access into a subset of apps within your organization. So on the first category, with EMS, you have something called the Azure AD Application Proxy. And the application proxy is something that we released the web application proxy with ADFS 2012 R2 or with Server 2012 R2. It became an ADFS proxy as well as an application proxy for these HTTP applications. Now, Azure AD Application Proxy that comes with your EMS is essentially the capability where you do not have to worry about deploying anything in your DMZ. You don't have to poke holes through your firewall. And how does it work? It's extremely simple. You establish these connectors inside your firewall that are connecting up to Azure AD and saying, hey, I'm listening for requests. Let me know, all right, at some point in time, if request comes through, the Azure AD App Proxy connectors will route the request to the application. Another key function of Azure AD App Proxy connectors is that you enable something called Kerberos constraint delegation. So as a result, it's able to seamlessly convert your access from what is known as a federated or internet-based kind of access into the world of Windows integrated authentication by using Kerberos constraint delegation and building a Windows service ticket to target for that application. So that is essentially what you have. Now, the rules that I saw, the logic that I showed you within the SaaS applications is exactly the same for the Azure AD Application Proxy. I could have said the same things. I want to do MFA for this application. So as a result, when the user attempts to connect up to the application, it targets the application proxy. The application proxy then says, OK, maybe I know about you, maybe I don't know about you. I need to log you in. During the process, it figures out that says, OK, for this application, I need to do multi-factor authentication, and it will prompt you for multi-factor authentication. Once we've passed all the gates, because we haven't even tried to access the application down here, once we passed all those gates, then Azure AD Proxy says, OK, now you're through. So it contacts the connector on premises and says, OK, here's a request for this application, and the connector does the rest of the heavy lifting. So that it looks like it's seamless where I go to the app access panel, I click on one of my internal applications, you would see the exact similar sequence as you saw with Facebook where I was prompted for multi-factor, and then I was essentially taken to the application. So that's the Azure AD Application Proxy. Now, let's move on to these ADFS applications. Now, one of the things as part of our entire notion is building a hybrid story. I keep repeating this, where it's users and device in a single plane. And as a result, we can project those users and device into a variety of applications using a similar notion of conditional access controls. Now, what you have out here is that a very simplified diagram as to what kind of Dilip showed. Now, what happens here is that the device gets enrolled into Intune. Intune is the one that checks for that compliance of the device. And as a result of checking that device, as we mentioned earlier, every one of these devices has a record in AD, all right? And that record is common. And we built the capability so that the record looks common both from a cloud view as well as an on-premises view. And how do we do that? We use Azure AD Connect's capabilities to do write back of those devices into my on-premises systems, where now on-premises with ADFS 2012 R2 or higher, we essentially can do conditional access. and where we can say, hey, I want to restrict access to this device only based on managed devices. Or for compliant devices, we've added the same equivalent set of capabilities with 2012 with Server 2016. Now, the way it works is that once the device shows up, okay, I guess I should stay closer to this. Once the device shows up, we are essentially evaluating those policies, and it's a wide range of policies. I think there was an earlier slide that really described thinking about it from the perspective of to access an application, you can be based on users or security groups or attributes of the user. You can be based on the strength of authentication, whether you did multi-factor authentication or not. It can be based on the device state. And we have a wide range of device state, starting from thinking about what is the type of device. Is this a personal device, which is a BYOD device, or we call this workplace join? Is it a corporate-owned device like a domain join device, or a newer form in Windows 10 called Azure AD join? So we have these wide range of, is it managed, is it compliant? That level of data drives these conditional access policies that are, where you have flexibility in saying, I only allow access based on these types of attributes. All right? Okay, So essentially, the one additional point that I wanted to add was that across all of these scenarios and use cases, we are essentially provisioning a device credential onto that device. And whenever we authenticate with Azure AD or ADFS in the server Active Directory ecosystem, we will authenticate the device alongside the user. And as a result, we have a stronger credential of proof of that device, which then we use the directory data and use the device data that is reported by Intune to us to be able to drive these conditional access policies. And you can see in these cases, I am prompted and I get access. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that with our Server 2016, we also enhanced on the ADFS side, where we really can restrict access purely based on these Intune devices. It's really based on the compliance view. In 2012 R2, we only said, is it managed? Now we've added the compliance view. And we have a notion of support for down-level PCs as well. And right now, and which is a concept that we call as auto workplace join. We're changing the terminology a little bit. But it enables your Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 domain join machines to also participate in this ecosystem. And finally, it's more important from the perspective of access. We can revoke access if the device goes compliant. Just like you saw in the Office case, you might be restricted and says, I'm not kind of compliant. And finally, we've also enhanced the web application proxy as well. Again, it's an equivalent system where we can support aspects of EAS authentication, where we can pre-authenticate with both the user and the device credentials. Now, moving forward, I'm going to switch back to my demo mode. I'm just going to show a couple of things. Which one is this device? Is the iOS device 7 or 6? Okay, let's try that. Let's see. Okay, it's not projecting. No, that's not that one. Okay, let me try to connect it again. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and change the demo on the fly, so bear with me. So what I wanted to kind of showcase here is actually, this is on my Windows 8.1 PC. And as you can see, I've already done the work of already joining my device as well as management. This is actually from my previous demo in my last session. Now, I'm going to go back and show the set of attributes so that you're kind of aware and understand the data from the directory that's driving these decisions. So let's try to go access my And one of the nice things about having a compliant device is that we let you, at least within the ADFS system, we let you essentially seamlessly sign in. Once you've signed in, as long as the device that we check against the directory is still continuing to report as being compliant. So now, as you can see out here, I've already logged in, and the most interesting piece of data out here is is out here in the device claims. You can see a wide range of claims, and let me see if I can get the Zoom one, because I wasn't set up for this. Okay, my Zoom, it is not working right now, so I hope you can go read this. Let me point out to a couple just to kind of make sure that you understand. You can see there's a wealth of data about the device. There's some display in it. But more importantly, we have ways in which we're detecting whether is the device managed or not. Is the device registered to the user that logged in? Because that's what determines our SSO experience. If you register the device, you get those SSO experiences as part of logging in. In addition, we have the new claim that was called the is compliant that gives us the ability. And you can also see, because it's my personal device, it's like a workplace join, we have a trust type. You'll also see a domain join trust type show up. You'll see. This data can be used. Imagine there's different ways in which you can use the data. I can say I'm restricting access only to domain join machines if I wanted to go do that. So that's the level of the power that you essentially have within this experience. All right, that concludes my portions of this session. Feel free to swing by for questions later, or I'll be at the booth tomorrow afternoon if you have more things around the identity and the Azure AD and the Active Directory side of things. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to speed up some of the rest of the slides so we can get to the cool part, which is like where are we headed and roadmap. So we already mentioned this earlier, but we do pretty comprehensive VPN and Wi-Fi profile management. We have extensive partnership with third-party VPN vendors, Cisco, Juniper, F5, and all these partners. In addition to working with them on just VPN and per app VPN, we're also working to extend the conditional access scenario, just like you saw for Office 365 services, but also do it at the network level. And we also support a whole bunch of certificate management lifecycle features. You can deploy certificates. You can associate them with VPN Wi-Fi. We can set a policy that will automatically renew the certificate before the lifetime of the previous certificate expires. And of course, when the employee leaves, you can revoke the certs. So I'm not going to go into the architecture details here because of time. But there's a white paper that we just published because we worked with a lot of enterprise customers who are deploying Intune to do certificate management. And that white paper was written in partnership with an external consultant so that you can actually get the best practice guidance on how to deploy certificates to mobile devices. The other thing I just want to quickly point out is all the rich feature you had with the conditional access to O365 email, those are not out of the box available with Exchange 2010 and Exchange 2013 server because they shipped for 5 years back, right, the Exchange 2010. So Exchange team has been porting those kind of conditional access features from the Office 365 service to the new versions of Exchange Server that will ship later with Exchange 2016 and beyond. But what we had to do is work with our enterprise customers because there's an active need today to make sure that you can manage and do the same kind of conditional access. So we in Intune worked with the Exchange team to make sure that we can still give you the conditional access experience. The workflow is slightly different, but not very different from what you saw in the demo. So this is just a high-level architecture of how that access works. So let's move on to where we are headed. So you saw that we've actually got a pretty comprehensive story on how to do conditional access with different Office apps, mobile apps, as well as the SaaS applications, as well as the on-prem. But we are moving forward to work on completing the story, how we can get comprehensive access control so that there are no entry points for the end user to bypass conditional access, right? So for example, today, one of the most common asks that we get from a customer is, it's great you've secured me on the mobile, but somebody can just go to a home PC and just sync my documents to OneDrive, or they can sync my email to an Outlook instance on that. So we have a short and a long-term solution. The short-term solution is already in preview today for select customers and will ship next month, is the ability to do, you as an IT admin define, here is my list of domains, domain GUIDs for your organization, and if the OneDrive sync is happening from any of those whitelisted domains, then it will allow you to sync. But if you're sitting in a home PC which is not joined to your corporate domain, it will be blocked. And then we're also working with enhancing the Outlook application to also take advantage of all the Active Directory authentication library, just like the mobile apps. So that will be supported on Outlook 2013 and above, not to Outlook 2010. So that would be a way you can, by the summer timeframe, get access control to Outlook and OneDrive from your desktop PCs. Moving on from there, the next choke point is like people still can bypass by firing up a browser, and then I can get to OVA, and all this cool stuff you did still can be bypassed. So that's another bigger problem that we're working with, because all the older protocols that were used by OVA and SharePoint are not compatible with the latest conditional access technology with Azure AD. So there's a migration work happening, moving from that org-ID protocol to the new conditional access-enabled AAD protocols. So that will also come in later, where you can initially at least restrict your browser access only to managed and compliant devices. And then in the future, we're also looking to enable a scenario where some of our customers have asked the ability to say, okay, I'm going to require that if somebody is an unmanaged device, they can just get read access. They can't save anything out from the browser. They can't copy attachments and save it out, but at least I can give them read and edit access within the browser. We also are announcing with Intune the ability to do Mac management. We have a session on Thursday. I urge you to go and attend that. It's the iOS, Android, and Mac support. So there we'll be showing off all the new capabilities where you can register a Mac device like any other iOS device, and then you can enroll them, deploy VPN, Wi-Fi certificate profiles. But then we also working with the Office teams and the Active Directory team to make sure that the Office apps that run on Mac are also Active Directory library aware. So that is something that's in progress. Last but not least, the whole conference, you've heard a lot about Windows 10. I want to actually drill down into a couple of cool new features that are coming with Windows that makes this whole secure access really better. So one of the first things is when you go into the Windows 10 deep dive sessions, you'll see that we're building this kind of conditional access capability into the operating system. So you'll have this kind of workflow where I talked about, where a user requests that I need access, you prove yourself. We've enhanced that experience by not just having the ability to do just Intune and AAD management, but also address one of the most frustrating problems we have with iOS and Android platforms, where what constitutes a jailbroken device? I mean, it's based on a bunch of heuristics. It keeps on changing, and then you have to keep your applications up to date to keep detecting those kind of vulnerabilities. We said we have to do a better job on our own platform. So we worked very closely with the Windows team, where we partnered with them and said, as a part of the secure boot attestation logic, so they can actually do some checks to make sure that from the TPM onwards, it's all certificate chain, that no malicious app which is not certified by Microsoft or IT is installed on that particular device. So that information goes up to a cloud Windows attestation service, and then Intune looks up to that service before granting access to this, so that you actually can get true jailbreak detection on Windows 10. The other thing we are doing is all the unified enrollment workflow that you saw Chris present, where you had to go to the company portal and then the user had to download and do a few extra steps there, right? We want to minimize that on Windows platform. We want the end user experience for conditional access to be super simple. So when you actually go into Windows 10, there's just, you can go to accounts and add a work account. And that process behind the scene does everything for you. It does your workplace join, it does your Intune enrollment. Everything happens seamlessly behind the scenes. So by the time it just says you're done, you start getting access to your corporate resources. And then we're also adding a whole bunch of new compliance policy rules, and I've just listed a few sample items here. Because you have to think that Windows 10 is an operating system that works both on your mobile phones as well as your desktops. So there's a lot of interest from our SCCM customers especially to say, for even my domain joined PCs, I want to make sure that the device is patched, it is up to date with anti-malware signatures, and it's got firewall enabled and a whole bunch of such rules. So even for your normal domain joined PCs, you can make sure that they're really secure, and then they get access to their corporate resources. So the other demo we saw in the keynote, which is related to our whole story around data protection, is the fact that what we have done is we wrote our own secure containers for iOS and Android platform, and we didn't want to do the same for Windows. So we just said it's part of the operating system, and once again, we partnered with the OS team to build the same technology that we've been working on into the operating system. So with Windows 10, you have a separation of your work and personal data, but the best part is it's the same application that does that. And there's an extra capability that we've built in Windows 10, which I'll actually show quickly. When you look at the EDP policy, Enterprise Data Protection Policy, you can say here are the apps, and those apps could be universal apps, or it could be desktop apps. And even the older desktop apps can be subject to data protection policy, and without even having to do any app wrapping or anything. All you have to give is the app identity, and then once you put the path, then when the app's launched, it's going to be protected with these policies. And those policies are going to say that, what do you want to do? Do you want to block them from doing any copy-paste or any of these operations? Or do you want to prompt the user and say, give me a justification why you need to copy or move this data out of this container? Or you can just put it in an audit mode and just monitor and see what are the apps that people most frequently need to share, and then you can set your policies based on that. So those are some of the options that we've implemented in Intune to support enterprise data protection. And there's actually a detailed session where we're going to show demos of this. I think it's tomorrow, how to manage Windows 10 with Intune and SCCM. If you're interested, I urge you to attend that. And to conclude, the main thing is you have several, as we started earlier, saying that you have some challenges as you move from on-prem to cloud. And you have different choices of how you can try to do these kind of secure email and access control scenario. But what I want to leave with the key message is to make sure that you understand, and your teams back home understand, that architecture really matters here. It's not just a way of cooking up something, okay, I'll make everything go through proxy and go. I mean, that doesn't really scale when you come into a cloud architecture. So that's where really the key differentiator for us is all these services, Office for productivity, Azure for identity and access control, and then Intune for device and app management, really have been built ground up as fresh cloud-based services. We didn't just put Active Directory in a virtual machine and call it the Cloud AD, or we didn't put SCCM in the cloud and said in a VM and say that's Intune. We actually re-architected and rebuilt the whole infrastructure for the cloud scenario. And you saw Sam and I co-present, and we actually have our partners with RMS and Office teams. We meet every week to have this kind of very close collaboration to make sure that our customers can benefit with end-to-end scenarios. And that's the new Microsoft. I mean, we are all about cross-platform, all about collaboration to enable end-to-end scenarios. That's the real benefit you get when you sign up for EMS along with Office 365. And so, as I mentioned, these are the key differentiators. You have the access at the device level, identity level, app level, and the data protection. As Sam showed you, it can work for cloud or on-prem resources. You get the best productivity apps. You don't have your own secure email container apps that your users will hate you later for forcing on them. And then, of course, we have the tight integration. So with that, we really hope that you like the information here. If you've tried Intune or Azure AD Premium or RMS, great. We'll welcome and would love to have your feedback. If not, I really urge you to go to sign up for a trial account and see how it can be used in conjunction with your Office 365 deployments. So I think we have like 2 minutes for questions, but we're going to be hanging around here for more questions.